Matt Makens here with your AgNow Weather. Let's get to it. First off with some of the hazards that may be coming through. I'll touch on some of these hot weather hazards for the south at the end of the video because we're going to see some flash drought conditions kicking in for the south. In the meantime though, throughout the weekend and early next week, heavy rainfall is going to move over the high plains of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and far northeastern corner of Wyoming. That precipitation will spread out, but that'll be extremely heavy there. Also some flooding occurring as we have some snow melt, some additional precip in some of the mountain valleys to the northwest. Strong wind is going to be a problem over the four corners that will lead to not only continued rapid drying and drought growth, but also a wildfire danger, a concern of that. We'll have some severe weather throughout the central plains from Nebraska down through Kansas into Oklahoma. Be mindful of that severe weather risk, especially the 6th into the 7th of May. And then we'll have some isolated flooding here throughout the central plains as well with that very heavy rainfall. So we're definitely into that spring season where we're watching out for these thunderstorms, the severe weather risk, the winds, the fire danger. It's a classic spring package here in that hazards outlook. Let's focus on the soils. This is a look at the soil temperatures and the shallowest layer recorded. So all these red dots that are expanding and moving north with every week we do these AgNow weather reports, those are temperatures of greater than 60, so the soils are warming up. And throughout most of the Corn Belt, we have a lot of orange dots there, and that's going to be 50 to 60 degrees. And then north of, we're still just below 50, but warming up quickly. So the soils are warming up, and in cases where they're so dry, we could use some moisture, obviously. Let's take another look at the soil moistures. Around Iowa, we've had some improvement, and that improvement does continue. But the soils are still technically drier than normal, still a drought footprint there, could use more water, and there is more on the way. Down throughout New Mexico into southern Colorado, not much water on the way, so drought will remain there. But for the northern high plains here where we're getting some of that heavy moisture, that's why it's considered more of a risk to have that heavy precip, because it's falling on relatively wet soil, so it may lead to some ponding and lots of runoff with that water. Let's talk about the timeline of the storm activity for the next 10 days. And this animation will walk you through every storm as it crosses the country, also Mexico, and also Canada included. But a series of storm systems will be popping up over your neck of the woods and sliding on through. Kind of the quieter areas will be California, Arizona, New Mexico, Florida, and the southeast will also be relatively quieter than the rest. Most of the storm flow will favor the central U.S., almost as if you draw a belt right through there for the central U.S. will have that storm activity. Let's talk about how much moisture is going to come with these storm systems as they pass through. So again, over the next 10 days, so we're looking through May 12th, here's a lot of water, especially in this region right in here. As those storms fire up, potentially severe dangers there, they move to the north and east and with them carrying lots of water. There's that dry area for the southwest and drier, relatively speaking, throughout Florida. There's that bullseye of heavy water up into Montana, into parts of the Dakotas and Wyoming. And for these areas, we are from 1 3/4 to 2 inches and higher totals. It's a lot of water for the time of year for that area, but that does extend into the prairies of Canada. Valuable water for their grazing, their crops, their crop prep. But this bullseye of water here is so widespread. Let's zoom that map in. We're starting around central and northern Texas, so around Dallas and close to it through Oklahoma, and that broad area. All of these reds you see on the map represent at least 2 inches, if not approaching 3s and 4s or 4s and 5s. And around Paducah or anywhere else where there's going to be really strong thunderstorms, isolated totals of 6 or more inches will be possible during the next 10 days. It's a lot of water. What's left of snowfall? Well, not much. We have some of that in the Rockies, and we'll get a couple of feet of snowfall there in the central to northern Rockies, and some hints of snow across Canada, but we're starting to run out of snow season here. Not to say it's done yet, but we certainly are running limited on the number of days for snow. Let's turn back to that hazards map, but again, there's this area of heat that's going to build in far south Texas, Gulf Coast states, Florida. It's going to be abnormally warmer than normal temperatures. It's going to last maybe a week or so, and it kicks in as we go throughout next week. The issue here is how we may see some flash drought being promoted. If you haven't heard the term yet, flash drought, it's getting a little more traction with some of the ag meteorologists, ag climatologists, the government. It represents when we see a sharp rise in temperatures and that drought, the dryness at the same time. Culmination may bring some troubles there. I think the biggest issue would be around central Florida. to dry out more rapidly than others. But thankfully that does not last too long. We'll get some cooler weather and some more moisture in that direction later in May. Speaking of which, let's take a look at May's moisture here in a recent social media post I put out there just a couple of days ago. All right, let's look forward. Here's a look at May, and the precip areas that were of interest are going to be the green and blue areas. Notice they get a little thinner as you go forward in time, and then we start to bring in some of those oranges down to the south. So early on in May, we have a lot of moisture for the plains, shrink it down to mostly the central and northern plains by mid-May, and then later May, we start to shift everything northward and dry things out a little bit. So May in total is looking like this. Central to northern plains favor for moisture, and we start to bring in some drier conditions around Florida and the Gulf Coast. Again, hurricane activity, something like that may upset this apple cart, if you will, but overall it looks like drier for the south, move that moisture up to the north. And with that, that's today's AgNow Weather Report. We'll see you next time.